So if we move to the discussion about our latest publication. Before that, just a brief introduction of trade policy research we conduct at the IPS. A broad area of study is trade policy impact on growth and factor markets. Especially, we have done research and we are conducting research in the channels of trade policy impact on overall economic growth, GVC participation, and the factor markets, especially labor market. In this area, we have produced research on the impact of change of trade and industrial policy variables on Sri Lanka and South Asia. These are some of our recent publications. Recently, we completed these two studies on raw materials from foreign entity of concern, then that battery will not be eligible for this consumer subsidy. The other requirement is battery component requirement. According to that, assembly activities should happen in either US or NAFTA, North America Free Trade Agreement country. So what is the role of graphite in electronic vehicles? Anode and cathode materials of an EV battery contains about 200 kilograms of critical raw materials. These can be nickel, cobalt, one is graphite. Generally, lithium-ion battery contains about 80 kilograms of graphite. This varies according to the battery chemistry. This is an average value. So graphite is categorized as a critical raw material by the US and also the United States. Sri Lanka produces high quality graphite. So these are the critical questions we ask in this study. Can Sri Lanka graphite industry join the EV battery value chain? Will the exclusion of China open a door for Sri Lanka's graphite in the EV battery market? The other thing is, what node of the EV battery value chain that Sri Lanka mined, then battery cells are produced, they are packed together into battery packs, then they will be used in the electronic vehicles. So this is a value chain. Sri Lanka should identify what is the most feasible node of this value chain. We can join a company. We followed mixed method approach. Quantitative part is mainly focusing on existing market share, growth of market penetration, comparative advantage, and the tariff structure Sri Lanka and other exporters face. And also we did a modeling exercise because now relative price is going to be changed. Chinese graphite are facing higher price in the US because of the consumer subsidy. Consumer subsidy is not given to Chinese graphite, but other countries' graphite gets this subsidy. So now this vehicle which contains graphite non-foreign entity of concerns are relatively cheap. So this can create a trade creation and trade diversion effect. We try to model the direction of the trade diversion and trade creation among the graphite exports. Qualitative part was mainly focused on identifying the nodes and also identifying what are the strengths and especially weaknesses Lanka face in joining different nodes of the value chain. Because we understood that industry and the expert views are very important. Unless our policy recommendations will be pretty much different from the ground reality. You can see graphite production and graphite deposit, available deposit data. China dominates. Sri Lanka is a very tiny player, though Sri Lanka has very high quality purity graphite. The market penetration is considered. China has increased its market share in different markets, for example, EU and the US from 2018 to 2022. China has increased market share from 43.3 to 74.2 in the US market. Sri Lanka's market share, unfortunately, kind of dwindling. This is mainly because the rise of the low-cost graphite exporters like China, Mozambique, and Madagascar. China and give the subsidies to countries. US has a free trade agreement, but this is a quantitatively impossible task. You can see, even if these countries, there are like 15 countries which has free trade agreements with the US. if they redirect their entire graphite production to US, still they can export like 13,000 metric tons. That is 17% of US requirement to produce 1 million of electronic vehicles. So their goal is unrealistic. Inevitably, they will have to find other sources outside of US Free Trade Agreement aggregate and FEOs. So our major findings are Sri Lanka has a comparative advantage exporting graphite. However, the current volume is very low and price is relatively high in key markets, especially the US and EU markets. Market share is going down. Cheap producers and are major competitors, especially Madagascar, Mozambique, and China. However, the discriminatory industrial policy of the US puts Sri Lanka in an advantageous position. Still, the opportunities might be fiercely competed by Mozambique and Madagascar because these are the surplus exporters. There are many exporters in the world. For example, Japan, South Korea, these countries export, but they are net importers of graphite. Net exporters are only Mozambique, Madagascar, and Sri Lanka outside the Chinese market. You can see Sri Lanka's graphite is very costly in the US market. For example, natural graphite ton is about 1,000 USD when China exports it to the US, but Sri Lanka, it is about 1,900. So it's close to twice as China's price. So modeling exercise shows there will be a substantial increase of these graphite exports because of the consumer subsidy. However, this modeling exercise is not very much realistic. This is based on a lot of assumptions. The general idea is exports will go up, but it will go up not only for Sri Lanka, but also for cheap producers like Madagascar and Mozambique. So there will be a fierce competition to benefit from these subsidies between countries like Sri Lanka, Mozambique, and Madagascar. Benefit from this IRA. So one thing is getting into an agreement such as Japan-US Mineral Trade Agreement. It's a specialized, narrow free trade agreement. It is not a comprehensive free trade agreement, but focus only on the critical raw materials. If Sri Lanka gets into such free trade agreement with the US, Sri Lanka's graphite will be eligible for consumer subsidies, even if we process it from Sri Lanka. Currently, we can export raw graphite to a FTA partner. Now, the FTA partner can process it and export to the US. Still, it is eligible for this IRA subsidy. However, if we process it, according to the current setting, Sri Lanka's graphite will not be eligible because processing should be done in FTA or North American market. However, if Sri Lanka has a free trade agreement with the US, processing can be done within the country and get the subsidy. So we can see firms are now relocating to North American countries and also the countries have free trade agreements with the US. For example, LG Chem is moving to Morocco. Morocco has a free trade agreement with the US. SK1 and Westwater Resources, they are mining in Alabama. So US gave up mining graphite because it was a costly thing, environmentally harmful thing. They were not competitive. But mining now in Alabama because of the consumer subsidies given to the graphite produced in North America. So our focus group discussions and key informant interviews revealed that most promising activities may be in the upstream, mining and processing. Minor processing may be producing an anode. Even anode production may be very difficult given the lack of technological know-how and the cost associated with that. However, if FDAs or joint ventures are possible, Sri Lanka might be able to produce an anode. Downstream activities are considered, for example, battery cell and battery pack production. There are logistic and technological constraints. One thing is generally battery packs are used closer to the vehicle manufacturing. That is the logistical arrangement of the world currently we witness. So if Sri Lanka will not have electronic vehicle plants, it will be a bit unlikely to produce a battery pack within the country. But upstream activities might be possible. So these are the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats for these upstream mining activities. Strength is high purity at mining, and thermal processing researchers have done it is possible to this graphite into a battery grade level with minimal environmental impact. China is using, I think, acid processing to do that. And also Sri Lanka has growing trade links with ASEAN countries. ASEAN countries are very interested in this EV battery manufacturing, especially countries like Indonesia. Indonesia has nickel deposits. However, major weakness is high cost, low volume, and also the government has a royalty fee of this mining. In our key informant interviews, it is considered as one of the constraints against this expansion. Opportunities are, as I discussed, the surge of EVs in the global market and also major threats are relocating of firms to the North American market because of the IRA subsidies. And fierce competition Sri Lanka faces from Madagascar and Mozambique. And Sri Lanka's decline in market share is another threat. These are policy recommendations. One thing is, as I said, the possibility of mineral trade agreements with the EU, US, and also EU. EU may be following the US footsteps in future to make sure their supply chain vulnerability is reduced. The other thing is focus on the role of sustainable raw material supply to ASEAN countries who are interested in this EV battery production. And dialogue with the industry to identify an incentive package for expansion and cost reduction. This is very important, cost reduction, because currently Sri Lanka is not price competitive in the global market. So facilitating local research is very important, especially when it comes to value addition. We have seen graphene production in Sri Lanka, but researchers told, for example, there is no battery test in laboratory in Sri Lanka. So these things should be facilitated by the government to increase research activities on the local universities. Thank you. We have, we want their input because our policy recommendations should not be away from the realistic ground realities. So we have three panelists to contribute to our discussion. Professor Anura Vijayapala. Professor Anura Vijayapala is professor at the Department of Electrical Engineering, Faculty of Engineering, University of Malta. He's very well experienced in these research areas, and also he worked for the Ceylon Electricity Board from 2015 to 2017. Thank you very much for joining us. And we have Mr. Amila Jayasinghe, CEO for Bogle Graphite Private Limited. You all, I think, you reached us asking about this price compared to Sri Lanka's price is very high. Yes, it's true. As I showed, Sri Lanka's graphite is fetching a very high price. It is not that competitive. So Mr. Amila Jayasinghe is an expert in this area for about 22 years, serving both as the executive director and as the current CEO at the Bogle Graphite. We have Mr. Akila Soisa, Deputy Director, Electronics and Electrical Printing and Export Services Division of the Export Development Board. Thank you very much for joining us. To move forward in the discussion, I would like to start from Professor Anura Vijaypala. Of course, you all can comment on our research. I'm guiding the discussion through this guided question. We want to know, based on your expertise, what is the status of Sri Lanka's technological readiness in utilizing graphite for EV battery production? We mainly want to understand whether this is like a more really remote pipe dream kind of thing, whether Sri Lanka should not waste resources on this area. And mainly, what are the policy interventions you suggest to increase research capacity? Because in our key informant interviews, we understood research facilities are not that good for the university researchers to develop products in this area. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me for this forum. A lot of people in your areas in the graphite field as well as the economists are present here. And you know that Sri Lanka's market share is very small, as you know, both in EVs or even graphite production. And what I saw in one of your piece of publication is that our total graphite resources may be about 5 million tons or something like that, or something about that. So the world, I think at the present rate, the EV market is growing in the world. I think with the targets, new targets, I think we should get, I think you are pretty, and I think if you do the world market, and 50, 70, 80 million electric vehicles every year to be added from now to 2050. So that will require some couple of billion tons of graphite, both natural as well as synthetic graphite for meeting the demand, especially under this new act when the Chinese supplies are restricted. And then the US, although the synthetic graphite is a little bit more expensive, but still they will consider both to source natural graphite as well as synthetic graphite for battery manufacturing. But nevertheless, I think this China's formidable presence, I think that even US cannot control. Even now the cattle batteries, I think they have gone into a agreement with Tesla for using cattle machines for Tesla to produce EV batteries. So they have their connections. Anyway, control is there. So I think even US will find it difficult to control the way that China has gone into EV market and EV batteries. I think the cattle already holds about 27-30% of EV battery market. So if we come to Sri Lanka, I think the best possible chance in this respect will be the possibility of checking the partner country or within our country to set up maybe a little bit of value addition to our graphite rather than trying to do a EV battery because our quantity is small compared to the required volumes for the future. And maybe to get the benefit of the current opportunities, maybe to sell a little bit value added because our graphite is already expensive compared to the world market prices of $1,000 to $2,000 a ton. Ours is on the high end. And if you mineral, manganese, cobalt, etc., 10 times more costly. And where the value of the weight of the cathode is also double the weight of the anode. Therefore, I think our opportunity will be probably a little bit of value addition or to maintain our high-end pricing in the wake of this new tax laws in US, isolation laws in US, so that we can at least sell at a little higher price because our quality is good. And based on that, maybe we can think of getting. But if you just imagine getting up a EV battery pack manufacturing facility here, it will be very difficult. And a little correction also, nowadays, even Tesla imports cattle batteries and Chinese batteries, right? And I think even Nissan is considering Chinese batteries because it's too expensive to make their own Panasonic and other batteries anymore. Because in the market compared to Chinese BYD and cattle batteries. And now in Sri Lankan cars also now we get cattle batteries. They have found because we had about 6,000 Nissan Leaf and other EVs here, which have run out of their useful battery life and no solution was there. And competitive price, maybe I want for my EV and it costs about 2.5 million and I get a range of about 250 kilometers, 40 kilowatt hour battery. So I cannot get it from anywhere. But the China ready to send it. And now the government has removed the restrictions. So you can get, so all the vehicles here will gradually get Chinese battery replacement. And I did my research and I found that the module they are selling is acceptably good. And that is going to New Zealand and other countries as well. So what I think the graphite experts can add value, more value to the whatever the things. I'm not a graphite expert. So what I think is sell at high end or try to get a anode production connection. Somewhere anode production we also supply and try to get a little more with our constant supply to them on a week basis. Maybe a US company, maybe whatever. But the large companies will not be interested on our small quantity.
I will move to Mr. Amila Jayasinghe. So we understood that Sri Lanka is in a disadvantageous position, though there is an opportunity because of the price competitiveness. Price is very high right now. It is nearly twice as China's graphite in the US market. Is there any suggestion from the industry to cut down the cost, maybe expansion of the mining activities in Sri Lanka? What kind of policy changes you can request from the government?
At the moment, why it's expensive is the current mines which produce graphite are very deep. Bogali is about 500 meters deep. Kahataga is about 600 meters deep. So we also have a small mine which is 20 meters deep, and that production cost is much lower. We can compete with China if we can get that working. So the idea is to have a lot of mines. Bogala has a deposit of 140,000 tons. So if you have 10 Bogala, that's 1.5 million, and we had about 3,000 mines when the industry was doing well. So imagine 140,000 into 3,000 that's a huge deposit, provided regulations that is needed to do this mining activity. So at the moment, you have to go to 17 places to get an exploration or a mining license. So what we suggest is, for example, if I explore in this area, if I apply for a license, I have to go to 17 places. And I give up this and you come and apply for the same thing, we'll also have to go to 17 places. Now, environmental concerns cannot matter whether I mine or what we say is GSMB should get clearance and have licenses ready for the mining people to come and just pay. So the problem is environmental authority wants some money. Everybody wants some money legally, not illegally. So why not charge the guy who's trying to mine that money from GSMB and distribute it, but have cleared areas for mining. So graphite areas are known. This is our first industrial product in this country. So everybody knows where the graphite is. So it's just a matter of clearing these areas and giving a license. That's one way of getting people to come in and start with. There are a lot of companies from Canada, Australia who are trying. They try for, it takes about 5 years to get a license, right? And then some local politician comes and disturbs it. Problem is our law is not implemented. Anybody can come and put a protest. Even Bogle has been there for 150 years. Very recently, a village said it's too noisy, and then we had to stop work and prove that it is not noisy. And these guys are all Samudri fellows, producing nothing for the country. So anybody can just block any industry. So those things also has to be fixed. Once you get a license, there cannot be Buddhist monk, a local politician, bloody Samudri cannot come and disturb these things. It has to go. So that I don't know how you can do it, right? So if those things are there, but there will be there are a lot of people interested in mining. But unless we can get the cost down, we cannot be competitive. We have to compete with China if we are going to go for these EV batteries. Or Madagascar, now China is not exporting. Madagascar will get all the investments. Mozambique will get all the investments, and these are all flake graphite. Flake graphite is pretty easy to produce. That is cheap. But this purity story is not valid anymore because you just need a little bit of acid and you can get it up to 99.99 Chinese, all that. It's much cheaper than Sri Lanka when you put some acid. So this is no longer a competitive advantage in EV industry. But there are some research being done by some of our professors in Sri Lanka where they're trying to replace synthetic graphite with our graphite. There is some hope there if they can get it to work. And you said there are no battery testing, but IPS has a battery testing facility, and Professor Atula Vijay Singh is doing a lot of work on that. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to work with them, not because of them, because of the restrictions that they have. So if those things are also not there, maybe we can work, because we were trying to offer them graphite. We want to work with them, but we started talking to them in November, and up to now, EU wise and all that, but we don't know whether we are or not. So I don't know how we can fix that. But Sri Lanka, we charge 9% royalty even if we add value, as long as it's graphite. So who's going to add value in this country when you charge for electricity, labor, your technology that you bring in? If the government is going to take a royalty on those things, I mean, government should take royalty on what is under the ground. Let's dig up the value. They should go for a higher value, not 9%, even 15%, but for the value of the product that comes up, not for the activity we do after. More value we add, more royalty we have to pay. So very soon, because India is just next door, the electricity is cheaper, everything else is cheaper. It's much easier to mine it here, sell it to India. Market is over there. And I think you all have seen that the Indians are very interested in coming into Sri Lanka and mining. With this structure, they will mine, take the material to India and process it there. So those things the government will have to figure out what to do. And then the disruptions. Main thing is not the amount of money government charges, the ease of doing business. Oh, I'm telling you, 150 years, we know the villages, we know the politicians. Still, I can stop the mine. Just one guy. And then recently somebody was saying there is graphite in the water stream. And luckily we had all the licenses and everything. So they couldn't do that. But, if one day there's a one-day delay, because, our fellows are very good at losing documents, files and all that, our government authorities. Our GSMB loses a file every year. And then the license gets delayed and somebody complains, they will immediately stop mining. Now, Sri Lankan, we are Sri Lanka, so we know how the system works. But foreigners who come here, they don't know how the system works. They expect when they pay, things will happen. So, us doing this is very good for us. Nobody else can enter. We can keep the price high and all that. But as a country, if you want to proceed, I think these things has to be fixed.
Point, yes. About this battery testing facility at Timothy University, we are right now installing a small education unit. Small educational battery testing unit. We got a 20 million rupee grant from a Japanese party through ATB. And right now we are installing a leaf battery and a testing unit at our one of the laboratories. So that is for the education. Our graduates equipped with battery testing knowledge also in the future. And also we will try to provide services to the industry also if somebody has a battery. And before buying it, if you want to get a certificate of testing or anything, services to the industry also. so that some knowledge is imparted to our young engineers when they come out of graduate from the university on the battery side and the battery testing also.
Thank you. Let's move Mr. Akhil Soisa from Export Development Board.
Thank
I
you.
just want to know whether there is a set of government initiatives to promote linking Sri Lanka's exporters to this EV market.
Yes, thank you, Asanka. Thank you for inviting me to this valuable discussion. Yes, we had done some initiatives to attract some investors to this country because, as other two correctly said, this we need foreign investors. Definitely, we need foreign investors to this go. Otherwise, we won't be able to survive because not the graphite. We need it to convert to graphene. Graphite is a raw form. We only export graphite. So in 2023, we only exported around $5 million of graphite. That is graphite. So graphite all are exporting. So that's why we need it to convert to graphene. So graphene is I think it's very valuable raw material. It's I think 100. I don't know what is the value proposition. It's around few more times valuable than graphite. So graphene batteries also these days graphene batteries also very have a very high demand. But the process of converting graphite into graphene is very costly. So we can't bear that cost. Sri Lankan companies can't bear that cost. So we need foreign parties to partner with us. So I think that is one of the main things. So we had some meetings in 2019. We had some meetings with graphite companies and also with Slimtech. And in addition to that, we had meetings with BOI. We set up a BOI EDB task force to attract investors to investors on this initiative. To manufacture graphene in Sri Lanka. But we couldn't succeed on that. We tried our level best to attract some investors with the help of BOI, but we couldn't do it. And also, I must say now, Oil Corporation. I think you all already know Oil Corporation. They are manufacturing. They are going to manufacture an EV battery in Sri Lanka. Now they are constructing a plant, and they are manufacturing low voltage and high voltage batteries. They are going to manufacture purely Sri Lankan made battery, EV battery. So their main objective is to export it, not for the local consumption, to export it. That is one of the. I think that is one of the breakthrough initiatives for a Sri Lankan company is going to make. And also, I think we have some companies in Sri Lanka who are assembling. I think you already know some companies are assembling EV cars in Sri Lanka. So it's around 35, more than 35% value addition is there. Not still we are importing the battery component we are importing, and other components, rubber parts, sensors, and all that. So those kind of parts, cushions, they are made in Sri Lanka. So if we can manufacture the battery as well, so it will be more than 70-80% value addition we can get to this vehicle. So those kind of things we need to, I think, keep in mind.
Thank you, Akhil. I would like to open the floor for questions and comments.
Can I just ask a small question? Sorry. Just want to check, as you know that EV, as you know that EV technologies are also now changing and the sodium ion batteries are coming into play. So how will that affect the graphite industry? As you know that there are some issues with graphite being used as the anode in sodium ion batteries. Have that been taken into account? As you know, most of the Chinese companies are now investing in sodium ion batteries.
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, currently the dominant battery type is like this lithium-ion batteries. They want graphite, but if battery chemistry will change, as Professor said, because of these security concerns, if new technologies will emerge, graphite will not have much use in EV battery. So one assumption is battery chemistry will not change. Our studies only relevant to the current status. Yeah.
And if you can, the present context is, that cattle and other Chinese manufacturers have moved from this lithium NMC batteries, nickel, manganese, cobalt batteries, to lithium ferrous phosphate batteries, which are much more, much more, recyclable. I mean, the cycle life is high. The NMC batteries have 2,000 cycles, whereas the lithium phosphate, ferrous phosphate have 5,000 cycles. So about 10-15 years of battery usage. So I think they are presently concentrating on that. And sodium batteries are still they consider as a research level and just getting, commercialized. But still the financial sense is in the now it has moved to lithium ferrous phosphate, where the voltage is a little low, 3.2 volts per cell, whereas the lithium NFC batteries have 3.7 volts. But then the number of cells will be larger for assembling one battery. But it's still cycle life is much higher, 5,000. So that is why they are, at the moment, they are concerned with the Tesla and the American companies and the cattle and the BYD, all are concentrating on lithium ferrous phosphate batteries for the future. But what is coming to the market is still NMC batteries, having 2,000, 3,000 life cycle. But a few are now Sri Lanka also few lithium ferrous phosphate, 5,000 cycles they are also getting now at the moment. And the one interesting question is now this BUI joint venture. I didn't know that EV battery manufacturing facility is coming up. So in that case, are they not able to source some of the material from Sri Lanka for that?
You mean
Graphite for example.
Oriel.
Korean companies?
No,
yeah.
Oriel. You said Oriel is the.
Oriel. Yeah. Oriel, you mean?
Cannot they use our graphite?
Yes, they are going to use our graphite, and also some parts they are going to import battery cell, or some parts they are going to import, but they also can procure graphite from Sri Lanka as well.
So is it new?
Yeah, it's a new initiative, and also I can connect them with graphite companies. Yeah.
Just one comment I had in terms of the regulation. So in addition to the 17 approvals that's needed, there's also a maximum limit of 40% on the foreign ownership. So if you look at in terms of liberalizing that regulation, also it can be conducive to investments coming into Sri Lanka, and that's an avenue that can be explored even through the study for Sri Lanka. So just one.
But I think if you come through BUI, you can have 100% ownership.
Yes, that's a special percentage.
So any foreigner will come through BUI.
Good. Great. Thank you. Guillermo Arenas with the World Bank. I had a couple of questions, one for our group of experts and one for the team. In terms of the cost competitiveness of graphite in Sri Lanka, you mentioned several issues. I wonder how the scale issue works here, right? Because in a lot of these critical materials, the size of the production matters a lot for the average cost, right? To give you an example, I come from Peru. We have a proud history of mining copper for 500 years. And a long time ago, we made our peace and realized that it's not cost competitive for us to go down the value chain and do more refining, right? Because the massive scale at which Malaysia or China can process some of these materials, the cost advantages are really too far for us, right? So I wonder if the fact of the scale of the production and the resources in Lanka will put a limit into what can be done into moving the value chain, right? If you could comment that on the scales, that would be good. And for the research team, I wonder, because you put a very good picture of how you can link into potentially the supply chains to the US or the EU directly. I wonder if you also looked into indirect links to get to the US value chains, right? And for that, I have in mind something like Indonesia, right? That they also have a lot of materials that are needed for battery production. They've been trying to incentivize battery production. They're struggling a little bit, partly for these scale economies too. But it might be that linking to some other countries who have other parts to produce the batteries could be an indirect way to plug into the US value chain, right? And that also could be another option. So I wonder if you look into these types of links, because I think also the president mentioned something about the free trade agreement with Indonesia or starting negotiations. So I was wondering if looking at those indirect links is something that you have done as part of the research. Thanks.
Correct. One reason why we are expensive is because there's only 2 mines and they're very deep. And because we don't have the sales, we don't produce that much. So the cost is higher. But if there is a huge take of the agreement, we can increase production. And with those regulations being fixed, there will be a lot of mines coming in. If we can go back to the 3,000 mines, then we can compete with any country. So that is there on price. And then on top of that, our graphite is easier to purify, so those other advantages are there. But then getting the people to mine, and also we don't have to think of only US. India is growing very fast, and they are also talking about putting mega factories, gigafactories and all that. So they also need graphites, and we already have FTA with them. And I think already they are looking at coming into Sri Lanka for mining graphite, because I got some letters from the ministry that the High Commission is very interested to talk about mining in Sri Lanka for graphite. So India is also a huge market. We don't need the tonnage that is required for US to get into India.
Yeah, thanks, Guillermo. It's true. I heard Indonesia is also interested in mineral trade agreement with the US. They are negotiating something like that. They have cobalt, which is important for manufacturing EV. Currently, Sri Lanka is not facing any trade barrier. This is considered as an intermediate product. Graphite is, we can export graphite under zero tariff to most of the country, except China. China has 3% of tariff, maybe because China is producing. But even in Chinese market also, Sri Lanka has preferential access due to Think Asia Pacific partnership that uptime trade.
Thank you, Sanka, first of all, for an interesting research study. I have a couple of questions. One is going back to the recommendation that we pursue or propose some kind of agreement with the US confined to mineral sector. I'm just looking at it from the geopolitics. Because of the trade wars, countries are being increasingly asked to pick sides. So if we were to pursue, and critical minerals is a very sensitive sector. Indonesia has already clamped restrictions on exports of nickel or something, right? So if we were to approach the US and say, here we have critical minerals, we would like to have an agreement with the US, that could be interpreted as us also picking a side in terms of broader relations in balancing all of these, what's going on. Second, so is that feasible? And given that countries are in some sense planning and imposing export restrictions, Southeast Asian region, can we, on the other hand, come to an agreement with the US with the explicit purpose of exporting? Second question is on the issue of, I see some of the industrialists very concerned about the environmental aspects. And we are an institute that also has, aside from trade, environment research also as one of our key core areas. So what is the environmental issue? And is there sort of reasons for us to be concerned about expanding mining in the graphite sector? This third question related to the greening of all of the, not just the US, but even the EU, when they're looking at sourcing minerals, they're also looking at whether our processes are environmentally friendly. Are we using renewable energy for any processing and all the rest of it? And that's how some of these countries are pitching into the EU market in particular. So is there a way for us to tap into that aspect of joining the value chain? And my final question relates to what Jerome said earlier. I mean, Vietnam has an FTA with the US, and they would probably benefit from the Inflation Reduction Act, right? And there is already some movement of Chinese production to Southeast Asia to take and to bypass these US restrictions. So is there any potential? I mean, Indonesia FTA, we have not yet come to that, but Vietnam has an FTA with the US. Joining that indirect trade, as was mentioned earlier.
Thank you, Dr. Irfan. The Chinese redirection export, actually, the issue is FEOC guidelines are much restricted now. They are even defining the stakes. The firms have 25% of stakes, more than 25% owned by China. These subsidies will not be applicable. That might be designed to discourage China's graphite going to a FTA partner and then going to the US. But there might be many loopholes in this. Environmental sustainability is a great concern because the EU are not consumption, instead of that subsidizing green consumption. But the environmental pollutant extraction is happening in third world countries like Mozambique, Madagascar. Currently, US do not have any conditions attached to these subsidies, like mined graphite should follow labor rules for environmental sustainability guidelines. But EU is concerned about this. EU has some guidelines, especially when it comes to the child labor issues and environmental concerns. But I think the countries should not rely on these guidelines, except that mining countries should have environmentally sustainable practices. Because at one point it is possible that EU will penalize this environmentally harmful mining activities like they are trying to do in this CDA and carbon border adjustment mechanism. Geopolitics, yes, it is a great concern. When if we sign a free trade agreement specifically to get benefit from subsidy, then it can be interpreted as aligning with some power politics. However, the nature of these mineral trade agreements are not that comprehensive. It is just some clauses we agree on not to impose export restrictions. I mean, that's what China, Japan, US free trade agreement on mineral is about. Both parties agree not to impose export controls because US is increasingly worried that supply chain concentration on China will be used as a political weapon only. Export restrictions will be applied, then their industry will collapse. About environmental sustainability of mining, maybe.
I can talk about graphite only, and I don't see any problem with the environment because Google has been there for 150 years, Ataka has been there for 160 years. We have never seen anything about the environment being written, and also it's quite easy to manage the environmental aspect because these operations are done underground, so very little comes out, and graphite is chemically inert, so it doesn't harm anyone. So even if it gets onto the surface, it really doesn't matter. So it's not a big thing, but when you come to ESGs, where you want to use other energy, government has to take certain decisions on allowing companies to use whatever means possible to tap into the grid. So already I think about 30-40% of our grid is renewable. It's mostly hydro. And then if we are allowed to put solar or wind and feed back into the grid through the existing transformers, then we can be zero. Like we don't need anything from the grid. Can go net zero. So that will give us an enormous advantage. But I think the government is talking about it now. Most probably, I think 3 months that will happen. So then we will have a very big advantage when it goes to Europe.
Because Europe is looking at greenhouse gas emission in this value chain.
Yeah, and we have another advantage because to get it up to 98%, producer has to use acid, and we can get it up to 98%. So even if you want to get it 90%, has to use very little. We are not doing it now, but if any other country wants to process it, also they don't have to use much acid. So that advantage is there with Sri Lanka.
Can I also add something to that? About this renewable thing now?
So,
renewable thing. Now Sri Lanka is already our electricity is minimum about 50% renewable, and on some years we have done 65% on wet years, and also the government has set a target now to go for 70% renewable electricity by 2030, and the CEB and all the people are working for it. And I don't see this is been that monetized, that we must sell it, which has not happened in the recent years. And also with the new Electricity Act, it will be possible, for example, Bogle Graphite to have a contract with, say, a wind power plant in Putlam or solar power plant in Hambantota, and have an exclusive agreement that we use your electricity. And CEB will charge only a wheeling charge for using their network for transmission from Hambantota to Bogle. They will say pay us 2 rupees or 3 rupees, a wheeling charge. So they buy from green energy, and then they can tell Europe that we are buying only green electricity for our operation. So likewise, and also I have noticed, Sri Lanka is a very low emitter. Our per capita emissions are almost 1 ton per person per year, whereas the world average is 4 tons per person per year. I mean the GHG emissions. So we are on the very bottom side of emissions. Neither we have utilized this for our product promotion, nor we have used it for low-cost power generation like coal. We would have done another 1,000 megawatt coal power plant here. It still remain less than 1.5 tons per person per year, which is far below the world average, and have our electricity cost much lower like India. India has 250,000 megawatts of coal. 250,000 megawatts of coal, whereas ours we have about 900 megawatts. So it is naturally our electricity is expensive, which is killing all the industries. Either we must monetize our low cost approach, and we are not doing that, and not having low cost power also, which is killing us. Right? So I think it's right time with the new Electricity Act, when the wheeling comes, all the industries, not only graphite industry, try to have a contract with renewable plants and say we are renewable. I think Turuli power plant is Turuli factory in MAS is doing that for last 10 years. They got a wheeling arrangement with the PUCL cell and they have a contract with the mini hydro power plant. Thereby, they are selling their product as we are having green electricity. So that should be done with every producer. And then market to EU and Americas and everything with a green label from our green electricity, which is costly, but still we can get more income from our green label. Thank you.
For the valuable presentation and discussion here. And I just want to add a couple of things to what you just mentioned there. So it's, in the same way, hydrogen and this grey hydrogen and green hydrogen, where it's beautifully marketed in the world to say, well, if you try to extract hydrogen through non-renewable sources, it actually worse for the environment. But green hydrogen is marketed really well, so why can't we do green graphite, as you, I think, just said? And I think almost have it as a, obviously it can't be greenwashing, it has to be real green graphite, but if you can do that, then there's really good opportunity to sell it at a higher price. If you're already struggling with competitiveness, as quite rightly said, all of these companies starting from apparel to EV are very, very focused on the supply chain emissions. They're looking for what the companies are doing on an annual basis to reduce their environmental impact. This obviously is a good opportunity for us. So maybe something else to add, dimension to add in the study for us to truly capitalize that graphite market out there. Just a addition to that is the 3,000 graphite
It's
that are available, operational at the moment.
2, 3.
Are the reasons that they're closed environmental or poor education on the environmental impact? Or
This was during Second World War. We had 3,000 mines,
right,
and we were supplying 30% of the world demand at that time.
oh, okay.
Then flake graphite became cheaper.
So yeah, maybe opportunities there, because I think a lot of the time it's misconceptions about the environmental destruction caused by mining, for example. I think as long as we can educate our communities, and we have to proactively do that, to be able to say what we're doing is bringing in good economic value, but we're also not destroying the environment and the community while we're doing so.
Thank you very much for the valuable discussion. I want to thank all the panelists. I think we can wrap this up now. Sorry.
So thank you very much for being present here today. So special thanks to the three panelists, Professor Anurag Chirpala, Mr. Amirali Tansina, and Mr. Akiliti Soisa, for sharing your valuable insights with all of us here today. And we also express our heartfelt gratitude to the reviewers of our study, Dr. Ravi Ratnayaka, Senior International Economist of UNSCAP, and Professor Prabir Day of RIS for their comprehensive and very constructive feedback on our study. And we are also very grateful to the key comments for this study. Some of you are here today, and the information you provided added value and depth to our study, so that we could triangulate our findings, our quantitative findings with your field experience. So this study was funded and supported by IPS completely. So our sincere gratitude to Dr. Krishnan, director, and Dr. Nisha Vikraka for the guidance throughout the process of this study, and Ms. Gayatri Karunatilaka, Mr. Chandrasekhar, Shameen Daniel, and Ms. Dinali Pereira, and also Mr. Amish Tenakon, support staff of IPS who are supporting their valuable time and efforts into getting this publication done. To everyone present today, we hope our work and discussion